candles, you would make sure that you light candles before Shabbat officially begins. And then in the Orthodox world, there is a complicated set um, of circumstances that allow you to even be able to cook certain kinds of things on Shabbat and have timers for lights and things of that nature. But it's very complicated stuff. Well, remind me on our Wednesday class, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
That's good. Oh, and we have my father on the call. This is an official service. Sab, I'm going to make you run the service. One of these days, I'll take a Shabbos off, and you can run it. I didn't even think about that. That's a good plan. I like this.
Hey, Peter. Shabbat shalom.
All right, we can't hear you, Saba, for some reason, but we know you're there. I was just talking to the cantor about it. Zoom has so many hidden settings and things that we are learning about day to day. It's really quite wild. Yeah. Shabbat shalom, Allison. Nice to see you.
Hi, how are you, Rabbi?
Very good, very good.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. All right. So let me just make sure the streaming stuff is working, and then we'll get started.
So which Perry do we have on?
There's only one.
Hello.
We have two. We have two Perrys.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Perry.
Shabbat shalom. I lost you.
Oh, and who else? Hey, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
The only one who's muted is the rabbi.
And Lauren.
I thought it was only appropriate that I should experience what my people have to experience each week. It probably should, if we're dealing with a true, breathed kind of relationship, you guys should have the power to mute me as much as I have the power to mute you. It is a great injustice in the world, I have to admit. But in any case, it's wonderful to see you all. It's wonderful to celebrate Shabbat. Roberta, I hope that you got your prayer book this week. You got it.
I know. I sneaked
Excellent.
it out when you weren't there. But,
Good. Yeah, just a reminder again, anybody wants to borrow an actual Siddur who's in the area, just let us know, and just don't rely on the rabbi. Eileen will probably be more helpful. That's all. So, okay, so I'm going to mute everybody here. Sorry. Okay, everybody still hear me okay? Good, and let me make the cantor a co-host. All right, we'll get started. Shabbat shalom, everybody. So we're going to start our service on page 120 as I light and bless our Shabbat candles. So if you have candles at home, per Linda's question earlier, this would be the time to light them along with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. Okay, and we're going to turn it over now to the cantor. And cantor, I think, has something new planned for us. We're going to experiment a little bit. We're in the Zoom age. We're going to try something new, a little bit different. And I told the cantor not to worry. And if it doesn't work, it's my fault. Okay?
Okay, so we're going to try something a little bit different. Something I've really missed is being able to sing as a community. So the first thing I'm going to ask is everyone make sure they're on gallery view. And I'm going to teach two different parts of a song. And it's intended to be a round. So once I've sung each part, I want you guys to feel free to pick a part, and you can either harmonize with me or sing along with me, and we're going to pretend that we are singing all together.
Yeah, and remember that we're not going to actually be unmuted, otherwise it would never work. Just doing it at home. So sing as loudly as possible.
This is part one. Shabbat shalom umevorach. Shabbat shalom Shalom umevorach. Again. Shabbat Shalom umevorach. Shabbat Shalom umevorach. And part two are the same words, just a little bit different. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. One more time. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Feel free to pick any part that you want. Shabbat Shalom umevorach. Shabbat Shalom umevorach. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom.
I'd say that worked very well. That was great. That's why we experiment, Cantor. Well done. Well done. Okay, we're going to give you a little bit of a break, but we're going to get started with Kabbalat Shabbat in our prayer books on page 130. If you're following in the book or following online, again, page 130 at the very top of the page. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, l'Adonai. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, l'Adonai. Nariya, nariya, letzor yishenu, nekadma fana betodah. Nariya, nariya, letzor yishenu, bizmirot nariya lo. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, l'Adonai. Lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, lechu ne'anena, l'Adonai. We turn now to page 131, Shiru l'Adonai, beginning in the Hebrew in the middle of the page. Shiru l'Adonai, shiru shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru l'Adonai, shiru shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. We turn now to page 132, or the very bottom of the page, the last paragraph in Hebrew. Or zaru ala tzadik, uleishre lev simcha. Or zaru ala הצדיק, ולישרי לב שמחה. אור זרו על הצדיק, ולישרי לב שמחה. אור זרו על הצדיק, ולישרי לב שמחה. We turn now to page 134, Zamru Ladonai, beginning at the very top of the page.
Zamru Ladonai bechino, bechino, bekozimra. Zamru Ladonai bechino.
We turn now to page 135, Romamu.
Romamu Adonai Eloheinu le'yishachavu lehar kodsho. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu le'yishachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu le'yishachavu.
And we'll turn now to page 138 for Lechadodi, and a reminder we're going to do the first, second, fifth, and ninth stanzas. Lechadodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shemu tiferet ve'litila. Lechadodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha, ki hi mekor haberacha. Merosh mikedem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machshava tchila. Lecha dodi, lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, Kiva orech umiori, Uri, shir daberi, Kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Bohi v'shalom ateret balam, Gam besimcha ובצהלה, תוך אמוני העם סגולה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Now we'll go back to Cantor Lauren as we turn to page 140, Tzadik Katamar, which is the Hebrew that begins where it indents in the middle of the page.
Tzadik Katamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yeiskeh shetulim beveit Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenun betzeva deshenim verananim yehu le'agid ki ashar Adonai tzuri belo avlatabo.
We now turn to page 145 for the Chatzi Kaddish, or 144 for the Chatzi Kaddish. Wherever the Chatzi Kaddish is. 144.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash meraba.
Amen.
Amari v'akyotei v'yamlich malchutei. Becha yechonu v'yomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Bagala u'bizman kari v'yimeru amen. Yehesh meraba mevorach. Le'olam ol me'almaya yitbarach, yiparach ve'yishabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitramhan v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal, shemei kodesha barichu, le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, tamira me'alma, ve'imeru amen.
We turn now to page 146 for the Baruch Hu.
Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 Adonai HaMevorach.
We turn now to the top of page 149, if you join with me in English at the top of the page. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows.
Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uben laila, Adonai tavot shemo, El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hamariv haravim, Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael, Amchavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu lemadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, v'shocheinu u'vekumeinu, nasiach bekuchecha, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו באורך ימינו ובהם נגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני Adonai Echad.
We're now on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha u'bechol nafshecha u'bechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha ושינתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת. Let's read together on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. And we turn now to page 161 at the top of the page, Hashkivenu.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashkilenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkilenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Hashkilenu leshalom. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm.
We'll turn now to page 162. V'shameru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ein beheni uvein bnei Yisrael oti leolam ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim vet haaretz U'ayom hashivim Shabbat, Shabbat vayinafash. In a moment, we'll begin the Amidah together on page 164 as Cantor Lauren leads us in a reflection before we begin our silent prayer. And as always, please continue silently, go at your own pace, and choose if you want to remain seated or to stand. And again, we're on page 164, and then we'll continue silently.
Adonai, open up my lips, and my mouth may declare your praise.
I really love that one. That's great. So we're now going to turn our thoughts and our hearts to those who are in need of healing. And as always, we have a list of those that we are thinking of in our community and connected to our community. But we also understand that there may be some at home who are thinking of names that we haven't mentioned. And I'll invite you, as I'm reading our list, to add any names that you would like to our chat. And of course, we are thinking in the broadest terms about a world that is in need of much healing, both of the body and certainly of the spirit. So let's begin with thinking of those in our community and connected to our community that we know are in need of healing. Liba Gita But Esther, Sandra Furman, Morty Lynn, Phyllis Katz, Raina Walsh, Deirdre Klein, Rav Tuvia Avraham Ben Asher Vilea, Stephanie Skit, Nancy DeMatte, Andrew Lesser, Joanne Sanborn, Jean Ben Sadoun, Gloria Taradash, Andrea Klausner, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Batsara, Marlise Silverberg, Louis Davidson, Susan Spruce, Fagel Tzipora bat Elisheva, Elisheva bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idle Basha bat Yitzchak, Tvei Menachem ben Chaim, Rivka bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Neil Elliott and Eileen Rosen, Israel ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka bat Rachel, Sarah bat Chana, and Moshe Eliezer ben Tzivya. So, in addition to those names and the names shared in our chat, we'll turn back to Cantor Lauren to lead us in a prayer of healing. Thank you, Cantor. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So this night, tonight, after weeks of having, brilliant scholars and teachers and presidents of institutions, you're back to just regular Rabbi Dan. But I did want to share with you something that, unfortunately, is some sad news, which may not have reached everyone and may not necessarily even register in the way that it did for much of the rabbinic world, certainly. But earlier today, the news passed that Adin Steinsaltz, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, I should say, passed away. And I will just say very quickly that it is tradition, and a good tradition, that we don't eulogize on Shabbat. So I won't eulogize him. I implore you to learn about him if you don't know who he is. But I did want to share a little bit of his unique Torah, his unique teaching, and why he is actually perhaps one of the most important and significant rabbis actually of the last millennia and perhaps in the history of Judaism, even if you may not realize who he is or what his impact has been. So most people know Rabbi Steinsaltz from basically his life's work, which he began at the age of 27, believe it or not. He passed, I think he was 83. In order to translate and to modernize the translation of both into English eventually, but in terms of understanding the complexity of, and even adding the punctuation that is missing, of the Talmud, one of the most important sacred documents of the Jewish people, and also one of the hardest to interact with and to engage with unless one is brought up in a world in which Talmud is taught. There are numerous layers to the challenges of studying Talmud, not least of which being the language. A vast majority of the 6,000 pages of it are actually in Aramaic, not even in Hebrew. So even if you were a Hebrew scholar, you would struggle to a great degree. And even if you could speak Hebrew and Aramaic, it is still a challenging piece of literature, a piece of sacred literature to study, because it is complicated by its very nature. It is complex. And so for thousands of years, or 1,500 years, give or take, Jews have been studying the Talmud as a central part of our identity, and much of what we consider to be the Judaism that we are familiar with has its origins in one form or the other in the Talmud. So you can imagine if up until the work of Rabbi Steinsaltz, the only way for a Jewish person to interact with the Talmud was through already establishing years and years of intense yeshiva study, you can imagine the challenge, right? That half of our identity, right, if the Torah is on one hand, the written Torah is on one hand, and the oral tradition is on the other, to imagine that the vast majority of Jews in the last century especially, who do not have the same necessary mastery of Hebrew or Aramaic or Talmudic study, for whom, without Steinsaltz, we would have had almost no access. And now, as a result of him finishing his work in 2012, there are beautiful, remarkably designed and easy to access copies. To buy it in print, unfortunately, does cost a tremendous amount of money. But because of generosity, his version, his English translation of the Talmud is available on a website called Sefaria, which many of you have seen me teach with over the months. So I just wanted to emphasize really how remarkable this man was and what he ultimately has done for all of us, whether any of us have actually ever taken advantage of his work or not. Perhaps tonight, after I teach a little bit, you might go out and begin to study yourself, or you might join the rabbi in a few of the classes that he teaches from time to time in these regards. But I want to actually talk about an article, believe it or not, that I remembered reading almost a decade ago, 2012, in which Rabbi Steinsaltz was interviewed by the Times of Israel. And he was a fascinating character in his own right. Interesting personality, again, who you should look up and understand. But this interview struck me, especially as a young rabbinical student, because it began with a very provocative question that was asked of him, and an even more provocative answer. And so he was asked a fairly straightforward question. He said, which book of the sacred books of Judaism should be at the core of Jewish education? In other words, which book should be taught, or books should be taught first? And remember, this is Steinsaltz living in Israel, so when he's being asked this question, he's not being asked just in a hypothetical. He's being asked in the sense that Torah education is part of education in Israel. So the decision about which book to begin with has a very significant impact, which we will see in a moment about how he gets there. So what would we assume, right? What would the answer be, an assumption? If we were asked what's the first set of books that we would want to teach as Jewish educators, okay, just even if you can't say it out loud, right? Torah. We would expect it to be the Torah. Yes? I would assume most of you would have answered yes. So Steinsaltz challenges that. And he says, Talmud, in fact, should be the core document, the document that is taught in the primary function, in the primary way. And you may assume, because he comes from an Orthodox background and because the Talmud is a representative of the Orthodox mindset in many ways, that this would be a natural answer. But even in the Orthodox world, to suggest that the Talmud should be studied as the primary document was a radical idea, not an accepted idea. Okay, so he explains. He said the Talmud is a central pillar for understanding anything about Judaism. More than the Bible. More than the Bible. The Talmud is not a divine gift given to people. The Jewish people created it. But on the other hand, it also created the Jewish people. In so many ways, we are Talmudic Jews, whether we believe in it or not. So he continues. Dealing with the Talmud is like doing psychoanalysis. At least you're beginning to understand what you are. Maybe one of the best lines I've ever heard in relationship to Talmud. No part of Jewish culture, he says, on any level, is without some sort of connection to the Talmud. But Talmud study would be helpful even outside of the yeshiva world. So he argues, and he says that, in fact, this would be extremely important in the land of Israel. And he says why? The Talmud is a book that has an enormous quality that the world needs now more than ever. And remember, this was him writing in 2012. He could not have even conceived of what he was talking about to think about 2020. Right? What is he saying? What is missing more than anything else? Sanity. Sanity. And he argues that the Talmud is, at its basis, a book of sanity. Now, any of us that have studied Talmud for even more than a few minutes may argue against this. Sometimes it seems almost impossible to imagine that this is sane. But he goes on to explain. He says that it was a big mistake to make the education in Israel based so much on the Bible. Because the Bible was written by prophets. In other words, the Bible, the Torah, was given by God to the original prophet, to Moshe, and the books of the prophets are written by the prophets, etc. Okay? The Bible, he says, was written by prophets. It's a prophetic kind of mindset. If you read the Bible, you somehow become, in your mind, like a little prophet. That's the way in which modern Israelis tend to speak to each other. They don't have conversations. They all have a complete and unlimited knowledge, and they are happy to share it. And this, again, he's writing as an Israeli, commenting on Israelis, and anybody who has some experience with Israelis may acknowledge in a most loving way that they are a confident people in their ideas and their decisions. It does tend to be sometimes that it is a demonstrative statement as opposed to a dialectic. Arguments in Israel are a certain kind of thing, but dialectic maybe not so much. So he says they don't have conversations, right? They have this complete and unlimited knowledge. Therefore, learning Talmud would bring a big change to the Israeli mind because it deals with and is connected to this dialectic. And ultimately, he argues from that dialectic a pathway towards sanity. And what does he define as sanity? A culture, a society, a nation, a world in which people are able to engage in discourse, to disagree, to argue, to struggle, ultimately speaking, to pursue some greater understanding of the world, but to be willing to do so in a respectful manner. This is the basis of Talmud study. It is still the basis of the traditional method of studying Talmud, which is the Chavruta model. Chavruta model meaning a person and another person sitting across the table many times for years, if not an entire lifetime, studying text together and building a relationship. It is not about uniformity. It is not about agreement. In many cases, it's about disagreement. But because we have created the kind of relationship in a Chavruta environment in which we trust each other and we can be okay with disagreeing with each other when we are pursuing a greater good, that this is the essence, he argues, of what Judaism, especially post-Temple period Judaism, is really all about. And I think that this, again, was written in 2012. And we may disagree with him. He may be provocative to the point in which some may even consider him heretical. And I should be frank, within even the Orthodox world, he is not necessarily looked at with great graces. Some actually saw a great issue with his making it so easy for people to access, right, to take away some of the struggle he was accused of. But for me, he is a hero of sorts. And I think whether, again, I agree with him 100% about his argument, what I do appreciate is the fact that he devoted his entire lifetime, really, from 20-something years old. He was the youngest principal in the state of Israel, I think, at 27 years old. Right? The man could have done virtually anything with his life, and instead he decided to spend basically every day of the rest of his life devoted to trying to make the Talmud accessible to all Jewish people, and quite frankly, even beyond the Jewish people. That is not a small task, and it is not a small impact. And it is something of a shame that his name and his legacy are not always as known as they ought to be. So while I won't eulogize him, and it would be disrespectful to Shabbat, and I think to the people who have yet to actually eulogize him, I will say that it was important to me that on this Shabbat that we not let his passing go unmarked and unnoticed, and that I hope each and every one of you will take a moment, learn a little bit about him. Again, his name was Adin Steinsaltz, and study a little bit. And if you've never studied Talmud before because you've convinced yourself that it is inaccessible, or that it's archaic, or that it has nothing to do with me, I think Steinsaltz says, no, that's not correct. Even if you don't necessarily follow it as an instruction manual, even if you do not believe every word is ultimately derived from God, he is correct in that the essence of what we consider to be Judaism today, in all of its facets, in all of its frames, in all of its movements and denominations, every single one of our iterations must tie back to the Talmud in some form or the other. And the more that we study it, even if we disagree with it, the more we actually understand, as he points out, as in psychoanalysis, who it is that we truly are. And I think that that is an incredibly powerful teaching, at least for me on the Shabbat, and I hope it was for you as well. And if you need some additional help in accessing his work and accessing the Talmud, that is why I am your rabbi, or one of the reasons. I am here to teach, I am here to study, and for me, I will tell you honestly, my beginnings, I'm in the beginnings of my study of the Talmud, nowhere near the ends of it. It is an eternal document. There is much, much, much to learn, much perhaps to leave in the past, but certainly many things that I think every one of us should appreciate as part of the gift of what Judaism gives to each of us. So with that, I will wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and I will invite you to turn back into our prayer books on page 586, as we begin the conclusion of our service with Aleinu, again, page 586. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. We'll now invite those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit, if you so choose, to rise at home or to remain seated. We'll begin by remembering those who have passed in recent months in our community. Nancy Fisher, Saul Fisher, Edwin Friedman, Sandra Friedman, Philip Idon, Laura Kurtz, Myra Osofsky, Vera Shaps, Lisa Schneidman, Norma Small, and Marjorie Weinberg Berman. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Louis Barron, Elsie Belsky, Bill Durst, Rhea Fishman, Jean Fleischman, Tobias Gilbert, Alan Baruch Klopman, Rachel Lewontin, Rose Massoff, Rebecca Matlis, Christine Nouvelle, Jack Pastor, Alicia Brown Pomeroy, Haftish Rebish, Esther Schulman, Carol Silberg, Vera Sims, Lena Spitz, Ethel Tromberg, and Jane Weisselberg. I also invite anyone who is saying Kaddish for someone we did not mention, if you'd like to mention their names in the chat, or simply to mention them out loud at home, as I invite the mourners to join with me on page 598 for the Mourners Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam U'Le'almei Almaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yit'aleh V'yithalal Shemei Dekudsha Barichu. Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tush Bechata V'nechemata Da'amiran Be'alma V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh Shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, if you're standing at home, you can please be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. I do want to just share a few announcements. Even as we are getting close to the end of the summer, the announcement sheet is still this long, so that just is a sign that we've got a lot going on still all the way through the end of the summer. And a few of those things begin very soon. One is to join us for Shabbat services tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. That will be live streamed, and then followed by our Torah study at 12 o'clock on Zoom. Anyone who doesn't have the information would like to join us. And all the more, picking up on my drash earlier, if you've ever been scared off of Torah study because you feel like you don't know enough yet or you need some prerequisite, I can't speak for other synagogues, but I can speak for this one. There is no prerequisite. Come. Bring your voice, bring your questions, challenge the rabbi, challenge each other. It's a great group, and we learn a tremendous amount. So even if you've never been before, invitation is always there. Come any Saturday morning, 12 o'clock. Also a reminder for Havdalah services at 7 o'clock through the rest of the summer. Our regular classes are still in session throughout the week, so please do check our calendar online and our e-blasts that are coming up weekly. Also a reminder that on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we have our next author night, this time with Talia Karner, who is discussing her newest book, The Third Daughter, which will include some comments from her to begin with, and then a ripe opportunity for QA. So please do join us. She is the former publisher of Savvy Woman magazine, and this is her fifth novel. As a matter of fact, she spoke here, I believe, my first summer when I first got here a number of years ago. So again, please join us on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. On Thursday at 5 o'clock, all the way from the land of Israel itself, Margaret Bromberg, our beloved Margaret Bromberg, is going to teach how to make challah. We've had this great series of challah makings, each time with a different person. So please do sign up again, Thursday, 5 o'clock, all the way from Israel. Also a reminder that we have a really cool art workshop, digital, virtual art workshop that is called New Beginnings Peace Planting with one of our members, Lorraine Pepper. That's August 20th, and all you need to do is to pre-register, but please do so before Monday, August 10th. That's this coming Monday, so she can order all of the supplies that are necessary. So again, it's August 20th, but please sign up by this Monday. It really should be a wonderful event. Also a reminder that Ruth Joseph's book group will be meeting on August 16th at 11 a.m. And that same Sunday, 7 o'clock, we are screening a film called Crescendo, which is a highly rated film about the creation of an Israeli-Palestinian youth orchestra, which will be followed by a discussion with me, sort of like what we did with Cantor Emily before and Fiddler. We will have a Zoom for the discussion piece, and you'll get a link to watch on Vimeo, which you can watch in the comfort of your own home. If you have any questions, or last time if it didn't work out the way you had intended, please let me know. We'll make sure it works for you this time, I promise. So with that, I think those are all of my announcements for now. We're going to turn back to our cantor, who is going to give us a closing song as I get my glass of Manischewitz ready. And, of course, a reminder to everyone that as soon as the service is over, we'll hop on to the next Zoom for our virtual Oneg Shabbat. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for being on the call. And Mark Mahoney, also, I see you there. Great to have you in the area, man. Very cool. Okay, Cantor, it's all you.
Thank you. I'm going to invite everyone to go back to gallery mode if you aren't in gallery mode, and we're going to sing again the song that we started out with. So I'm going to start with the first part, and feel free to sing along with whichever part you would like. Shabbat Shalom Umevorach Shabbat Shalom Umevorach Shabbat Shalom Shabbat Shalom Shabbat Shalom Shabbat Shalom Shabbat Shalom Umevorach Shabbat Shalom Umevorach.
Very beautiful. If you have a Kiddush cup or grape juice handy, you can join me on page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam morei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim ki v'hanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta nikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava u'ratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. L'chaim. Shabbat Shalom. You could all unmute yourselves if you'd like. We'll say a quick Shabbat Shalom, and then anyone who wants to jump on. Yasher Kol.
Shabbat Shalom.
Excellent.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great to see you guys. All right.
Lauren, could you give me a call, Neil? Lauren, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Lauren.
Neil, I'll make sure that Lauren calls you. Don't worry.
Someplace.
Shabbat Shalom. Come on to the Zoom. We'll talk there.